What's going on, guys? Super Nick 19 back here today with another Vainglory in-depth guide. Today we're going to be talking about laning and some of the mechanics that go into laning, how you should, how you shouldn't do stuff like that. Now, laning is going to be the weakest and strongest position in the game. Now, the reason this is because as a laner, your job is to dish out as much damage as possible. But the trade-off is you're not going to be as strong as the jungler or the roam who can afford to buy more defense items because you're building nothing but offensive items. Now, there's three main sections of the game that you really have to worry about, and that's early, mid, and late game. Now, early game is going to be either the most boring or the most hectic for you, depending on the other team's playstyle. Early game, you really have three main jobs. That is, last hitting the minions in your lane, trading with the enemy laner, and making sure you have correct positioning. And I'm going to go into these in depth one at a time. Last hitting is pretty simple, but can be complicated because the enemy laner is there. So what you want to do is you want to hit the enemy in order to do the last bit of damage and also get the gold from dealing the last bit of damage. Now, Vainglory makes this easy because you can see the minion's health bar. As it gets to a certain point, it'll go from a dark red to a really bright, vibrant red, and that's when an auto attack will do enough damage to kill him in one hit, which is really helpful. Now, what makes this hard is that you have an enemy laner trying to do the exact same thing, which is where positioning and trading come in. You want to have the correct position to not only be able to maybe hit the enemy laner without receiving damage, or to be not as far up just in case, because you might get ganked by the enemy team. And ganking is when the jungler or the roam come up to lane in order to try and get a kill for the enemy team. And this goes into trading. When you take damage or when you deal damage in lane, it's called a trade. You're basically seeing who can do more damage at that point. Now, it's not going to be a full-on fight. It's just going to be like one or two abilities, one or two attacks. But the main point of this is to try and push the enemy laner back into their own turret. Maybe even get them to go back to where they have to get health and health potions, or even to make them lose farm in lane. So positioning is super important because if you're too close, you can receive too much damage. If you're too far, maybe your abilities won't reach, so you'll end up losing a trade. And you can either win or lose a trade by either doing more damage than receiving or getting more damage dealt to you than you do to the other person. And that's pretty easy how to figure out who wins and loses trades. Like in the clip I just showed, I obviously lost the trade. I took way too damage and he even ended up killing me. Now I'm going to have some game footage as I talk about everything that's going on. So I hope that helps out a little bit more. And that's going to be like the first 7 minutes of the game, to be honest. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending. It should be anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes is the early game. Now, once you leave the early game, you have what's called the mid game. And what your job then is now positioning and dealing damage. Now, you only have two jobs, but positioning is really important and dealing damage is really important when you're in the right position. Once you start to go towards mid game, you're going to start sticking around your team a little bit more, traveling with them because you don't want to be caught out. Then farming in lane isn't going to be as important. It's still going to be important, don't get me wrong. You're still not going to want to let minions die in lane and not collect them as much as possible. But it's not going to be your number one priority. Your number one priority is going to be to stick with your team. Make sure you're not in a position to be getting a whole bunch of damage dealt, but also be in a good position to deal damage to other people. Like, take this fight, for example. I end up staying towards the back of my entire team in order to deal as much damage as possible without fear of getting damage dealt to me. And then towards the late game, your job is pretty much sticking with your team. Like, towards the mid game, you can sometimes rotate from your team up to lane and go kill some minions in lane, maybe push it a little bit out. But the main part of Mid game is you want to stick near your team, but late game you absolutely have to be with your teammates, because one team fight towards late game, which is anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes, about that time is when it starts. After that point, one person getting picked off or getting caught out away from your teammates and then they die can absolutely cost you the game, and that's something you don't want to happen. So although laning, in my opinion, is one of the easier positions to learn, it's definitely not easy to master. I've been playing this game for a while and I can't even say that I've mastered laning. I just know the basic properties of how to lane and what to do, and I can do decent sometimes, and then sometimes I do really bad. Of course, it's not my preferred role, but hopefully this will help y'all maybe learn a little bit more about laning, give y'all a little bit of an advantage over some people who don't really have a good idea. And again, I am going to show some footage, so I hope that does help. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a little bit. If you have anything to add, feel free to throw it in the comments below. If you liked the video, go ahead, give it a like. If you disliked the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs down. You know, I want to know what y'all honestly think of the videos. And more importantly, if you think this could help somebody learn the laning position a little bit better in Vainglory, by all means, please share it with them. We're trying to get as many people to not only enjoy the game, but possibly grow and get better at the game, in order to have more fun, more competitive games. So be sure and do that. Thank you guys, as always. I do appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys next time. Later.